Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the Daily Medicine transmission for July 14th, 2020, and you already hold the key. So welcome back to all of the subscribers, the regular crew. It's so great to have you here. And if you're new here, welcome. It's also wonderful to have you here. And as always, whenever you interact with this content, this is my shameless plug. Whenever you interact with this content by sharing, subscribing, liking, and commenting, it actually does signal to the AI overlords that this content is worth spreading to a larger and wider audience. So any support you can offer in that way is going to actually help the dissemination of this message to more people that might find it inspiring and helpful. So there's my plug. So let's get into the transmission for today. You already hold the key, as you can see here, as you saw here in the thumbnail, right? The image for today's video. That is a toroidal field, right? A toroidal field that comes from the heart, and then encompasses us in our aura, or our electromagnetic field, as it were, because our heart is an electric pump. Therefore, it emits a magnetic field, very much like the planet itself. That's fascinating, isn't it? Maybe just switch your perspective a little bit to consider that the planet is in itself a toroidal field, or certainly exerting or creating a toroidal field. It certainly makes a lot more sense for the Earth's magnetic field to be a torus, a T-O-R-U-S, a torus, creating a toroidal field. It kind of bridges that weird gap between the planet being a rotating ball in space and flat Earth, which, I'm not going to get into either of those things specifically here, but thinking of the planet and Earth as the heart chakra of the solar system and creating a toroidal field is a very fascinating thing that I want to draw attention to. But specifically about the fact that the keys are within. We hold them within ourselves to manifest our reality, to create the reality that we, not our egos want, but is in fact for the highest good of all. And that ultimately is in our best interest. And learning the difference between what is in our best interest as a collective, and not collectivism as in your individual sovereignty gets swept under the rug instead of the collectivist, right? You give yourself over for the collectivist globalist regime. That's not what I'm talking about. It's more about how do you identify what is your individual sovereignty and use it for the highest good, which is in fact the highest version of the Leo archetype. So we had Venus and Mars meet in Leo yesterday. They came into that conjunction. We talked a lot about that yesterday, and it really exemplified the creative and sacred union of these two polar opposites within ourselves. And it's when we are able to do this consistently over and over and over. And again, what was this new moon about? Well, it was about sanctifying that relationship, the alchemy within ourselves that then ultimately creates that toroidal field outside of us, right? That allows us to connect into a much larger chakra system than what we were led to believe exists, right? We have our Earth Star chakra that connects directly into the grid of the planet herself. We have all of these other chakras that exist outside of the crown that allow us to connect to the solar system, to the galaxy, to the universe. It's a much and the bigger our toroidal field is, the larger and more encompassing it is, the more connected we feel to everything, right? And that allows us to connect back into the source within us. So we do hold the keys within us, which is the source code within us. And when we can connect there, we realize that we open the door for ourselves and not anyone else telling us how to do it, what's going on. And we're going to see today that we're in a moment here where we are being asked and invited to exercise some patience in this moment as we are now adjusting to a very significant shift in timeline still. And, Pallas Athena's stationing retrograde today. We talked about that yesterday. Chiron is going to station retrograde tomorrow. We also talked a lot about that, especially in the new moon astrology report for this whole first half of this lunar cycle. So let's get right into the reading and just kind of see what's coming up for everyone, because, in terms of my, how are your dreams, right? How is your sleep? I know there was a huge Schumann blast that was pretty significant. There was a lot of fake news. What's really interesting to me is there's a lot of fake news always, right? There's no integrity in journalism left, none, right? Because it always comes back to the dollar bill. So we are the news now, right? It's up to us as citizens to really get the real news instead of continuing to give our power away over to people who claim to know what's going on but really don't. And why they're doing that and what's in it for them. Anyway, so I just got lost on that because it's just been so much on my mind. And I know that that's where this is all going, right? To realize that you hold the key within yourself, to connect to truth, right? To broaden that field, to connect to the source code within you. And we are being asked to exercise some patience in the midst of, a causal factor here of some real strife and being kind of, restricted and held down. So in the face of that, with all of these retrogrades that are continuing to happen, right? I mean, Juno is retrograde, Pallas Athena retrograde today, Chiron stationing retrograde, Neptune retrograde, Pluto retrograde, Saturn retrograde. All of these retrogrades right now are really giving us an opportunity to do this work within us, right? Rather than continuing to try to find external validation outside of us from people who are just doing the same thing. Trying to find, excuse me, trying to find external validation. Hold on one second, guys. Oh man, I choked on that one. Thank you for being patient with that. Whoa. So we'll just get into the reading and see, like I said, see what comes up for people and how this is really going to unfold. And things do feel like it's not necessarily a slowing down, but it does feel like there is some sort of stasis point here where we are being asked to really go within. And all those retrogrades, right, is really bringing us and drawing us into this experience within so that we recognize that we hold the keys. And we recognize that everything is within us. And it's a learning curve. And Saturn has been very, very clear about that. And as we're going to see in the reading, the opposition point, you can never separate these astrological transits from this from its polarity point. Sorry, man, how do you keep these telegram from just popping up constantly? This okay, let's just get into the reading, because it seems like every step of the way, it's like, here, I'm just going to distract you from giving the message because you're overthinking it. Oh, that was what I wanted to talk about. And I'm going to put some more information about this up later. But, you don't have to overthink it necessarily. Don't overthink it. Keep it simple. It's really simple. Don't get lost in all of this highfalutin spiritual language, right? And man, Jason Estes said it so perfectly yesterday. I posted a recent video that had really helped me kind of wrap my mind around and really confirmed a lot of things for where I'm coming from and how I'm interpreting what's going on right now. And one of the things he said, there was a question about like navigating 3D to 5D, and he was just like, just let it go. Just let it go. Yes, that is a thing that you may be dealing with, right? Your transition from 3D to 5D and what that means. But like, don't get caught up in all of the language and get caught up in all of these like narratives about what is or what isn't and doing it right. It's really simple, right? Be kind, be in your integrity. I mean, just follow the Reiki principles and you're going to be just fine. Be kind, be honest in your work and integral, right? Follow your integrity, be kind, do good works, be willing to focus the lens on yourself rather than judging other people, and you're going to just be fine. As soon as you start getting caught up in all of this language about dimensional shifts and all of the matrix of the planet, and I mean, these are all things that are very true and very real. It's just that it's just like scientific language at a lot of times that you get caught up in the language and the linguistics of it, and what it really does is makes it inaccessible to the average person, and that's on purpose, right? That's on purpose. This whole concept of ascension and this whole concept of higher levels of consciousness and how many dimensions that you get to and blah blah blah. Like, you are not in a 3D body going to really be able to wrap yourself around that. And so stop. I would suggest, my recommendation is keep it simple. When you started getting caught up in like, who should I listen to? And what is the truth? And what is this? Am I doing this right? It's all within you already. It's just a matter of becoming acquainted with it and being inspired, right? You know what it feels like to be inspired. That's Leo in the 5th house, right? That's what it feels like. You know when it's moving through you and you become a vessel for divinity. And we're going to see in today's reading how much of this is really being asked of us to ground ourselves and to root ourselves into. So let's take a look at this. All right, so we have the 5 of Wands as our causal factor, right? Strife, Saturn in Leo. We see Saturn as this major blockage in front of the other wands, right? The fire is behind this. So there has been certainly a lot of strife. There's no doubt about that. And there's certainly been a lot of a will to break out, a lot of struggle, a lot of conflict. There's been rash behavior. An aggressive renewal is really what this encompasses, right? Because Saturn does provide that resistance, and it provides a structure, and in some ways really holds things down. And sometimes in an authoritarian way. And remember that Aquarius, which is where Saturn is right now, is in opposition to Leo. And so, in fact, the authority and the boundaries that Saturn in Aquarius, in terms of the collective experience, right? Aquarius is the collection of all the nodes together and the ability to hold the power of all of these nodes connected to each other. Is been really it's just been relentless, and especially in its retrograde. So when it comes to us expressing ourselves, it really connecting to that individual sovereignty, as much as Venus and Mars have really exemplified that, it was a very sacred union in real time in some way, and you have to look in where it is in your chart, right? Where is it happening in your chart? What is it aspecting in your natal chart? What are the progressions? These are all things that we look at when we do an individual reading, to see like what areas of your life this is impacting the most. So there has been a lot of this dampening in some ways and restriction into this expression. But what happens is when you try to suppress fire, it definitely finds a way to burn. And this card does really stand out as revolutionary movements, right? And aggressive renewals, because the more that you try to suppress this fire, the more it's going to find its way to express itself. And the 5 and all of the suits in the tarot is always the bottom, right? This is where you bottom out and you have nowhere else to go but up. And so we do feel this causal factor here coming through. That's really, there's been a lot of suppression of this creative fire. There's a will to break out, and the light side of this potential here is that we have refreshment and renewal that's coming as a result of this dampening of our fire. So now, people are definitely feeling this and responding in all kinds of ways. So let's look at where we're at the heart here of the matter. We do have the Hanged Man, right? And we saw this yesterday with the Scribe. It's the same number. It's number 12. It's coming to this stasis point of stillness, right? This individual that's being shown on this card of the Hanged Man, they are turning their perspective upside down on purpose, by choice, right? It is a surrender and a sacrifice by choice. You're hanging off the ankh, right? There's a serpent coiled around that one foot. They have their other foot that is nailed. So you have this kind of crucifixion mentality here. And remember, the age of Pisces was the age of Christ. And Pisces is, in fact, the martyr. It represents the giving of ourselves, the surrender, the sacrifice to the collective in some ways. But this is by choice. This is an individual who has allowed this to happen in order to flip their perspective and to gain completely new insight. And so it does represent a turning point in life, because you are literally turning things on its head. And it's a time of consideration, right? There is a stillness that's involved with the Hanged Man. And it does show us that we require a new viewpoint. So when we talked about the scribe as a gift card, as a guidance card yesterday, it's the same basic idea, except just different imagery. But what you're doing is you're not making, the scribe is not acting on what they're transcribing. They are not coming to a decision about it. They are not having an opinion necessarily. They're just taking in the information. And that's what happens in the 12th house in the astrological wheel, the zodiac, is that everything that ever is and ever will be, and all of the experiences of a culture, of a society, of a collective in general, are all come together into that 12th house. So there's no way to ever really get away from our decisions, our actions, and the karma that it brings about. There's no way. What this suggests is that we kind of give, there's a devotion and an acceptance of our fate, right? And a surrender to this larger process. And there's something to be said for the maturity of this position. And so there's been a lot of strife. There's been a lot of dampening of our fire, of our solar fire, individual sovereignty and creative expression. And now in the heart of the moment here, we are looking at this moment of turning around and overcoming our own ego, right? The mind and the head is now at the bottom, and it is turning itself completely over. And we are getting a new sight of the world. When you do turn yourself over, you give yourself a new perspective. And there's a lot of patience that's involved, and there is a devotion. There's a sacrifice, a willing sacrifice, and not to reinforce the victim narrative or the savior or martyr narrative. It's really about accepting everything that has come full circle as a result of our actions, which is just what fate is. It's just a cause and effect relationship. It's not anything more than that, but we still have to accept that. And we talked about this earlier in the week, that truth has its consequences. And sometimes you speak truth, and you have to accept the consequences of that, even if your ego doesn't like it. And putting yourself in this position really does kind of allow for an acceptance of that without having to have your ego necessarily triggered, right? Because now your mind is at the bottom, right? You're flipping the head to the bottom and just allowing yourself to hang here. So this is at the heart here, which I know really a lot of people are probably going to keep struggling with, because they're like, when are things gonna happen? I have all this strife. I've been stifled and dampened, and my fire has been pushed down and pushed down and pushed down by authority and boundaries and time and whatever. And now we're facing this, right? This is the heart here of just like, it's time to enact some more patience and consideration and the maturity that goes along with flipping ourselves over, essentially, and give ourselves over to the situation and see and know that we are going to get what we need from the situation instead of just pushing and pushing and pushing. The other thing too is that Pallas Athena, the goddess of strategy and wisdom in war, because we are at war. We are definitely in an information war, a war for consciousness. There's no doubt about that. Is stationing retrograde today in Pisces. So this also is leading me to this conclusion here that, again, our strategy is to then, come to this point here in Pisces of where everything is accumulated, right? The fullness of everything we have sown and cultivated is now showing itself under the light of the full moon. And now we're going to be moving away from that. And part of that is kind of this letting it go, right? Allowing ourselves to flip our perspective. That strategy is now an inner strategy with Pallas Athena. When we look at where we are rooted energetically, this is where the inspiration comes in, right? The muse, and there's imagination, there's upliftment. This is running in the background here and asking us to really tap into the muse. Again, the muse is a 12th house Piscean type of energy, right? Where something that seemingly is outside of us comes in and inspires us, right? Is when we connect into that space, that liminal space that Pisces in the 12th house represents, that we are able to be inspired by the muse. And so it's important that we allow ourselves, even if we're not fully conscious of it, and we aren't, in this position. It certainly is much more about the subconscious level where we are at, but it also suggests that this is where we can draw our personal power from, where we can be stabilized, where we can find the core of who we are, is in this inspiration. But you can't do this. The muse doesn't come in through your ego or your mind. It comes in through a surrender to the forces of imagination and inspiration and transcendence that is part of the Piscean and 12th house energy. It's really strong here today. And I think a lot of it does have to do not only with the moon finishing its transit of Virgo by tomorrow, right, which is in natural opposition to Pisces, but also with Pallas Athena here, Neptune retrograde here. Like, we're really getting pulled into this space in order to really give us an opportunity to really acknowledge that it's all within us, and we have access to this inspiration by stabilizing ourselves here, to draw our power from the muse, which is about heightened resourcefulness and imagination and being uplifted. When we move up into where our conscious awareness is, though, the Eight of Forces, this is not a new card for us, but in its reversal is really suggesting that we do see in some ways that the storm is dispersing, right? That we have to do some cleanup, of course, but it's time to set new roots, right? It's time for new growth. And we talked about this earlier in the week, that it's, this new moon and this whole lunar cycle is really about setting the stage, like sanctifying these productive relationships in order to, and preparing the medium for the growth, right? And so we do see on some level, and I know it doesn't always seem like this, but we have to set new roots, right? We have to be focused on new growth. We have to apply our energy to whatever compels us. And I would argue whatever inspires us from the muse, where we are allowing ourselves to be rooted energetically and moving through this period of, sacrifice and surrender to our own fate, and whatever that is, and exercising some maturity and patience. And now we see that the storm is dispersing in some ways, that it's time to move forward in setting new goals, new growth. And it's nothing less than divine power moving through us. I mean, when you look at this card reversed, I mean, the lightning bolt is coming, it's shooting up from the ground or from the bottom to this tree. So again, flipping our perspective here is a real big part of the energy of today, if we haven't done so already. And I would encourage it as an exercise. I would encourage it as an exercise just to challenge yourself, right? If there's something or somebody, some influencer, anybody that you listen to that you really feel like is giving you the goods, right? I would recommend as an exercise to look at that with a different perspective. Flip yourself over and look at it from a different perspective and see what comes out. Because if we're not willing, if we don't have the maturity and the devotion to our own evolution to do this, then we don't really get to learn anything, right? It's through the accumulation of this energy. And we're going to see the Sun and Mercury today are really going to be supporting this process. a lot, and I'll go into that with the astrology. But we do see now, right, there is this awareness that the storm is dispersing, and we do need to move forward with the energy that has come through, right? What is lightning other than the natural rebalancing of the charge in the atmosphere, right? It's natural homeostasis. And I would like to suggest, and this will come through with the full moon report, that our full moon that's coming on the 23rd is very, very connected to this type of energy of an unexpected storm. And so we have to think beyond this, though, instead of waiting and waiting and waiting, because you find yourself just sitting around waiting for this storm to come, and you haven't done anything to energetically resonate with where you want to be after this storm. And this is what we really need to be doing right now, in my opinion. And this reading is really drawing us to this place. There's part of us that is meant to really take a step back and be patient and flip our perspective and accept what is happening. But at the same time, our awareness is like, okay, while I'm doing that, I also want to be able to visualize where I want to be. We talked about this yesterday with the lookout, right? This ability to utilize these, a heightened sense of awareness through the pineal gland, right? Through the third eye, the intuition and the foresight, right? To be able to see where we're going next. We have to, even in the midst of the dumpster fire below us. And this also suggests this, like we can get hyper fixated on the storm and the crackling of the lightning and stuff. But if we are not able to visualize and already resonate with after the storm, then we're really going to miss an opportunity here. And as you see with the Falcon, it's really saying we have to be ready to act when the time comes. And part of that is being aware of where we want to be after the storm, and realize that is an experience that kind of fertilizes everything in the process. Because what to expect really is a major adjustment, right? Here is our Venus in Libra card, number 8, right? There's that divine intervention that leads to gnosis and the Christ consciousness. Number 8 is related to gnosis and to the Christ, right? The infinity symbol turned on its head. It's divine intervention in a lot of ways. So this is about justice and fairness. And specifically, it's a balance of contrast. The adjustment card, Venus in Libra, is the application of our knowledge of these opposites in order to find balance, to bring the balance. So it's about true and conscious action here, and an uncompromising honesty and objectivity, and a realization of cause and effect, right? But part of that is accepting our role within that cause and effect through the Hanged Man, which is a surrender to the flow, basically. And from there, we allow ourselves to be inspired. We see that there is more work to be done after the storm. We are aware of this, and the most reasonable effect out of all of these things combined, and then that causal factor of strife, is that there's nowhere to go but up for those flames. Like it might be dampening them, but it's going to come out as some sort of victory. That is the next step, the 6 of Wands. And so we see here a really stark adjustment, right? Like I said, realization of cause and effect, uncompromising honesty. I mean, there's no getting around this, right? There's a very strong Saturnian element to adjustment or justice. It is Venus in Libra, but Saturn is really part of this picture energetically in terms of what Saturn represents. And Saturn did represent that strife, the dampening of the fire. And now it comes around and is part of the structure of justice that isn't, Saturn is the judge, right? Jupiter may be the lawyer, but Saturn is the ultimate judge. It is the boundary of material reality that says this is what is and this is what isn't. And that's why it seems to be very encompassed in this energy. So it's, the effect here is that there's a major adjustment either within our own perspective, and we are going to have the moon in Libra starting tomorrow, right? And so we'll have that moon in Libra time, and we're going to have a first quarter square with a moon in Libra and the sun in Cancer. So we also are looking towards this first crisis in action that the first quarter moon squaring the sun represents. And so this is going to be a hard boundary, right, of balance. Remember, Venus rules Taurus and Libra, so she uses her sensitivity to the material world to determine what is balanced. And so she's going to move past Mars now, right? She moves faster in her orbit than Mars does in its orbit. And so she's going to move past Mars now, and she's going to take that energy as a result and really start to, shine very brightly, and also at the same time really be filled. She's filled now with the light as a result of this really sacred union between Mars and Venus. It's very much about this inner alchemy that releases the Kundalini in some ways. So we do see here that this adjustment is coming, and it'll probably be right around the time of this first quarter moon, Libra moon squaring the sun in Cancer. And so there's adjustment coming, justice, right? But it's uncompromising honesty and objectivity, right? You have to true conscious action rather than delusion, right? And so, justice is a very hard line, and Saturn as a judge is uncompromising, right? Because there's nowhere else to go except the boundaries of reality. So it's coming. We need to be very real with ourselves, though, and that's surrender and flipping our perspective and accepting everything as it is. That's a strategy right now. Pallas Athena going retrograde in Pisces. That is a strategy now to just kind of flip it around and go back within in terms of our own strategy and wisdom. So when we look at our guidance for this reading, number one, Hilarion is the ascended master of research and science and truth and healing and concrete knowledge and spirit communication. Now we're talking about the muse, and we also have the unicorn here, which I'll flip to real quick because this connection here is talking about using your creative and imaginative and magical side through some sort of artistic expression. It's really about indulging this artistic and creative vehicle of expression, because this and to allow for this inspiration to move through you, right? That's what the muse does. It inspires people artistically and creatively, seemingly outside of themselves, but it's really about connecting into that source within that allows this to happen. So it seems like it's outside of ourselves, but it's really because it's just not coming from our ego. It's coming from somewhere else that is a much vaster, much deeper side of ourselves, part of ourselves. And so we have to indulge this side of ourselves if we want to be inspired. We can't just continue to work and operate completely in our minds in the ego structure and expect to access the muse. And so this is really leading us to indulge this, whatever this is for you, whatever your vehicle of artistic expression happens to be. Put some time into it, and you'll see that it opens you. It strengthens the field and moves through you. And then you start to be inspired in terms of where we're going next, right? You can start visualizing actually where we're going next and be able to bring that to you. Venus in Leo, she is magnetic. She attracts to her, and now she's full. She is full. That Kundalini released, and it is infusing her entire being. And now she is able to pull towards her that which that reinforces this passionate expression. Now, where it gets interesting here, we'll go back to Hilarion, because it seems counterintuitive at first, right? This is about research and truth and healing, but it's about research and truth and healing. And some of the most incredible breakthroughs scientifically come through a creative and artistic channel, right? It comes from being inspired, as opposed to just yes, it does take a lot of research and a willingness to go into these subjects. And that is why these two things are really seen together, because part of it is that we need to actually put the time in to do the research, to be open to the inspiration, but there has to be some sort of containment system for it and a willingness to go very deeply into these subjects. And so when Hilarion shows up, it really lets us know that this type of assistance from this figure of an ascended master is very close at hand, right? And his ability to really access this information, not based on what other people are telling him, but from his own gut, right? His own instinct, his own intuition. Look at all the spirits that from different time periods, different types of people, different ages. They're all there with Hilarion as he's educating himself, as he's steeping himself in research, as he is doing the work. And if we want to be inspired and we want to draw our power from this muse and this creative side, we have to be committed to a certain extent to this research. And this is just saying that this is at hand, right? This assistance is at hand if we choose to step into a trajectory that allows for research and truth and healing, right? And it comes from our own self, right? It comes from within us, not outside of us. I cannot stress this enough. So we saw the unicorn. And then when it comes to the Eight of Forces, right, we have that lightning bolt. The storm has passed. We know it's dispersing. We have to kind of clean up after the fact, but we know now that has been an experience that has activated us in some ways. Now the falcon here, or the peregrine, right, is talking about how, again, providence is on our side, but we have to act on the opportunity when it's presented to us. And the opportunity that is being presented is congruent with our soul's purpose. This is a really important thing to not lose sight of. Like, you'll know what is in congruence with your soul's purpose. You will feel it. That is what inspiration is, right? This is a whole thing down here. You know what it feels like, and if you don't, this is why it's important to practice meditation. Have a day. It's not even an option anymore. Like, if you really want to be on this pathway, it has to be a requirement. You have to be doing your meditation and your prayer every single day, Reiki on yourself every single day. And, even just for a few minutes, carving out that time. It's imperative at this point, because without that, you're not gonna, you haven't fine-tuned that inner knowing and inspiration so that you can act on it when the opportunity comes to you. Because a lot of times, if we knew everything about where we were going, we would push against it because it seems to go against what we think we want, right? And so, this has happened to me so many times. It happens to my clients. I'm having a conversation with a friend right now about if they knew that they may be making this very specific change before that it was presented right in their face, they would have completely sabotaged it because the idea of it was so unpalatable to them at the time that they would have pushed against it. So sometimes we just don't know. And again, there's that hanged man again, right? Just surrender to the flow rather than trying to control everything, right? Use that strategy to start pulling back and allow your inspiration to take over, so that when it's time to act on your opportunity, you just do it without even thinking. It's instinct, right? You'll be like, yes, I know what that feels like in my body. I know that is in congruence to my soul's purpose and mission, and I'm going to go for it. I'm not even going to think about it, because otherwise you miss it. And along with that, just to make it more coherent and just to really drive this home, the Seven of Roses, the journey, right? Our work, our creative endeavors, I would say definitely our creative endeavors and our work. This could mean an actual move for some people, as in what I just talked about. It's not going to manifest this way for everyone, but some people it will. Other people, it's about the direction of their work. It's going to require that we leave something behind. Again, the Eight of Forces. The storm may be dispersing, but we know that there's been destruction, and we have to be willing to leave behind the destruction and accept it for what it is, and start moving forward and start setting new ground, new roots, new growth, as opposed to trying to go back and recreate or just sit there and be sad about what's happened. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I mean, there's real trauma, there's real loss, these are real experiences, and this is where our compassion kicks in for people, that we all have our own way, we all have our own journey, and we all have our own challenges right now. And so to minimize those types of experiences for people is not what I'm trying to do. And what I'm trying to say is that we have to see these events and experiences as the balancing act or the trigger for our activation, just like Uranus, right? Which is actually in a trine to the moon today. So we'll get into that with the astrology. But this is really meant to drive home that we are, in fact, about to change trajectory, and our creative work, our creative endeavors are going to a new place, right? And we want to get on that ship and go, right? We don't want to miss the boat. And that's what the Falcon is. Don't miss the boat, right? Because there's never nothing is ever wrong, right? No matter what, everything finds its balance and homeostasis. And if you are not going to be able to fulfill your 3D contracts here, you will go elsewhere and do it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. We're all going to the same place, it's just we're on different rungs of the ladder. We're on different steps on the staircase. And that's Saturn is just, Saturn is just Saturn about it. It is what it is, and there's nothing that can be done to change that necessarily. So we are going on a journey. It may require leaving the safe harbor behind. If you've ever been out on the ocean in a ship of any kind, you know that you're always taking a risk of being subjected to the full force of good old Neptune, right? So, but it's worth it. It's worth it. And we need to be able to know what it is. And this is part of the muse. Again, we need to know what it feels like to be inspired and be ready to make decisions. So let's start looking at the astrology for today so we can see how we can utilize these astrological transits to the best of our ability, right? So we do see here, and let me know if you prefer this version or not, okay? Oh, hi, Meg. It's so good to see you. I like when you pop into the chat. Let me know how this version, I don't know. It's kind of sticking out for me in terms of, I just like looking at it. But I will say that I do see that this is also just as useful. I just really am liking this. So we're going to look at, here we are currently, of course, here's our moon in Virgo, 17 degrees Virgo, always rounding up for the Sabian symbols. But let's start backtracking just a little bit to see what's been going on since we flipped over into the 14th, right? The first thing we want to look at is these quincunxes. They're pretty bright, aren't they? There's a quincunx with Saturn with the Virgo moon, and there's a quincunx with Chiron with the Virgo moon. Both of the, Saturn again is retrograde. Chiron will station retrograde tomorrow. So First of all, as we talk about the Virgo moon, which is very much about the ability to really reconstitute ourselves, to get ourselves emotionally organized, to really hone in on our feeling-based landscape and understanding our intuition and getting into the meat of it, right? Like really getting down into the dirt, getting down low into the dirt, doing the work that is necessary to actually bear the seed for the next cycle. What happens in Virgo season with a plant? It is when the plant is drawing all of its nutrients from the soil. Photosynthesis is obviously happening, but it's not the primary focus of the plant, nor is the blossoming of the flower. It is it's gaining sustenance for the fruit, and the fruit is what holds the seed, and the seed is the next cycle, right? It's an endless natural cycle, the circle of life, right? So during Virgo, that's when we're getting down into the soil. The strength of our roots and the health of our roots is from Cancer, right? That is the root system. We get to see now like how strong they are, coming from a lineage, coming from a heritage, and actually doing the work, right? And so this is usually the 6th house is where these crises really come up for people, because it forces you into the actions and the behaviors and the routines and the habits habits that create a healthy vessel, a purified vessel that can really hold the seed of the next cycle. So we see that the moon is in a quincunx to Saturn. We've talked about Saturn retrograde endlessly, especially at this degree. The staircase to heaven, everybody is on their own step. Doesn't mean that we are unequal or not getting to the same place. We're just in different places on our own personal progression. And as much as we'd like to be more focused on our sovereign nature as individuals, and we are, because we have Mars and Venus that just came together in Leo, we also have to contend with the very cold, hard reality that everybody is in a different place, and we have to accept that about each other. Again, that goes right back to the conversation about discernment versus judgment, right? Saturn is the judge, right? Time is the judge. Karma is the judge. God is the judge. And I'm not equating Saturn to God. Please don't misunderstand that. The point I'm trying to make is that we can surrender this burden of judging other people, because that's not our responsibility. That will find its own cause and effect relationship. The quincunx here is that within us, in this very personalized experience right now with Virgo, is that there is a snatching away of the veil that we are able to do if we are training our mind. And remember, Virgo is ruled by Mercury. We're training our mind, and we're training our intuitive mind, right? Our gut in some ways. If we are training it and we have become very strong with it, we can snatch that veil of secrecy away right quick. And again, we may want to do that. And maybe that's what we need for ourselves. The quincunx here with Saturn is the big old wall that is, there might be a square peg, which is this moon in Virgo, or vice versa, right? The round peg, which is this moon in Virgo, but the square hole that it doesn't fit in is Saturn in Aquarius, right? We can snatch the veil away all day. You can tear down people's idols all day, but it doesn't mean anything when it comes to the natural state of progression of consciousness. You just telling somebody that this, that, or the other thing is blah, 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 is no match for the reality that everybody is on their own trajectory for their soul's evolution. And Saturn is just like, nope. So we have to adjust ourselves. Yeah, we want to snatch the veil away. Maybe we're really feeling that. Maybe that is something that is making itself known in our immediate experience. But the adjustment will come as a result of maybe trying to find a different way for these two things to coincide with each other. Maybe they're just not going to. And that's also a way of adjusting our expectations. Now, from there is when the moon then moves to the next degree and then is in a quincunx with Chiron. So very, very basically the same type of energy where we want to kind of take this really powerful, charismatic part of ourselves that we feel, right? We're individually feeling this way, overcoming a state of confusion and chaos. And we have this charisma and this really powerful, really powerful part of us that is now starting to pull it all together, right? To literally pull it together when everything else is falling apart and is totally hysterical and chaotic. Again, the quincunx, right? Where Chiron is sitting at this position in Aries that is really triggering all of this victimhood and wounding about things not happening fast enough. We want to change the status quo immediately, and that's an ego. That is what the ego wants, right? Aries is that subjective ego consciousness. So not only are we dealing with that in and of itself, the quincunx between Virgo and Aries in themselves, we're also having to pile on the fact that one is the moon, which is very emotional and how we feel and our immediate environment and experience, right? How we adapt to the environment. And then Chiron, which is just this wound of shame and guilt, and feeling like we can't get out of this identity of being shamed and guilted and about just existing, right? That's Chiron to a T, and trying to heal everybody else. There's that savior mentality, to bypass feeling like a victim of life. And so and then beyond that is this really wanting to change things very drastically, and the frustration that goes along with it. So again, we want to like take this part of ourselves and really literally pull it together, and it's going to find no traction whatsoever. They don't fit with each other with where Chiron is. That's just like, I am constantly being triggered because I want things to happen immediately, because I know they can, right? That's the thing. The seed holds the potential for everything that it will grow into. And so it can be really frustrating when you realize that, but it's not happening the way that you think it should. And so again, we're going to have to adjust our expectations today based on this. Pallas Athena stations retrograde in Pisces, right in here, 28 degrees Pisces today. And then we move on to the moon in a trine to Uranus. Oh my, this is wonderful, right? Because so number one, this Earth trine, they don't really need to, there's nothing here that we need to do to gain the stability of this aspect. And it's, Uranus has been a real challenge lately, and it always is, but now it's like really challenging our ability to brave the storm, so to speak, really challenging it. And what this moon, now 14 degrees Virgo, this is a Syrian starseed marking, okay? So if you have this in your chart, if you have Syrian starseed markings in your chart in general, just know that this is bringing this up. And this particular degree is about the individual being the culmination of a lineage, a lineage, and being, how do I say this? Not reminded, but given some sort of token, right? To show that you, in fact, are part of a much larger heritage and lineage. Because that's the thing about Virgo. It is about the individual work that needs to be done, just like an individual plant is doing the work based on their individual root system, but it doesn't come out of a vacuum. It's part of a lineage, right? That plant came from a seed, and then that plant came from a seed, and same thing. This is about the Syrian lineage, and really helping, right? Really finding some support and some traction with where Uranus is, that is like, okay, the pathway of the awakening here is going to be this consistent upheaval that is forcing us to brave the storm. Can we brave the storm, right? Our character is really tested and comes out with this degree of Taurus. And so where the moon is really supportive of this in terms of a Syrian lineage, because yes, we can brave the storm. Yes, this is about that toroidal field. I mean, this is down to it, to a T, right? In terms of the activation of this. This is what the Syrian starseeds do. This is their wheelhouse, right? Is the activation of this toroidal field and the manifestation of reality as a result of it. Now, this already backfired once, and this is the Atlantis story, right? Because we were not coming from it with full spiritual awareness, right? We were still utilizing this power out of greed and out of lust and out of an ego-based consciousness. We weren't ready for it, and it literally backfired on us. Now we are being supported in this moment to really brave all of these situations in the material world that are here to trigger radical transformation. This is what Uranus is in the chart. It is the trigger for this transformation. It turns things on its head. It's it's the ruler of Aquarius, and so it is the collective third eye, and it is transpersonal, right? These are larger cohorts of people. These are larger cycles. And then the moon is very personal. So we have this personal connection each of us gets to have to this lineage right now that we're not doing. We are supported, right? And there'll be some measure of like, hey, here is some symbol that you are on the right path and will really help, right? So keep that, and that's going to come through your inspiration. It's going to come through your intuition, right? All of these moon-based type of experiences, that's much more about our feeling-based landscape. And when we move, that's a trine, then the moon, it's going to, kind of go along into some less impactful transits, I guess you could say, some more minor transits, but then it comes into a sextile with the sun in Cancer. Now, this is a very interesting connection. Okay, first of all, this degree that the sun is in Cancer is Okay. This degree, and I know this degree just too well because it's where it's my natal black moon, Lilith. Okay. And the true Lilith, I don't follow the average Lilith. I follow the true Lilith and the true node. That's how I do it. So it shows the shifting and the changing on a regular basis as those things oscillate. So the sun in this degree, it is the Sabian symbol is a literary society meeting together. And what it speaks of is that there are some people in a society who are like the poets and the writers, and people inspired by the muse, for instance, who have the capacity to see and have an objective and a critical approach to things in our culture. And the psychological problems that come about as a result of it, right? So you're operating both as an objective mind, there's that Hilarion, right? And an emotional participant. There is the muse and the unicorn. Both of those things together is the meeting of this literary society. And so what do these individuals really stand for, or what do they represent in this symbol? Well, there are people in a society who are able to bring these two aspects together within them, who are, like I said, they're writers, they're poets, they're critics, whatever. They make concrete to what most people are just subconscious aspirations or urges, right? So this is where the sun is today. So we're really, sorry guys, I gotta plug in my computer. You'd think I would do this beforehand. Okay, so we know that so these individuals in society are able to make these connections, and through the expression of their art or what inspires them, they are able to bring these things out to an objective, concrete reality, just like Hilarion. Oh man, I couldn't have planned this better myself in terms of how the reading is corresponding to today's astrology. It just blows my mind. So the sextile, that's what we want to talk about, the sextile to the sun in this moment from the moon. Now this degree where the moon is in Virgo, the Sabian symbol is a lion tamer, okay? It is taming that part of ourselves that, not to suppress it. It's not about suppression. It is about the need to tame our vital energies in order to fulfill our destiny. Now, keep in mind, like I said, Venus is now moving past Mars. They're still very close in Leo. And as Venus has moved on, there is a very distinct experience when the Kundalini activates, where you kind of, when it's the first time it happens, or you're not prepared for it, or your vessel is not primed, or you have no guidance, it's like a chicken with its head cut off, right? And it's a very distinct moment on this pathway, and this is where Venus is transiting right now. So you have to be very mindful that we do not let this energy go all the way to our head and make us kind of crazy, because again, this is why that Hanged Man is so important right now. And in some ways, the strife and the dampening of that fire it does allow for either a renewal, right? Or it can, the dark side of it is that it's very aggressive and very forceful and very rash. And with Venus, she is full, right? We talked about this. She's full. And it's really important that we use our intuitive nature and our feeling-based nature to know what that feels like and tame that energy so it can be channeled appropriately, other than all over the place. And when we do that, when we have a sextile, right? A sextile is a 60-degree angle. It's an investment opportunity. When we take those things and invest them into each other, we have an incredible harmonious moment here. It's harmonious, but it requires our participation. So we need to invest this energy of the moon where it's at, taming those vital energies, not letting the lion run rampant, right? And apply that, invest that into this critique, right? This ability to critique what is going on in society that most people aren't even fully conscious of yet. There are like I said, the poets, the writers, the people on the leading edge energetically are really a big part of this, and they can be objective and emotional at the same time because it's their inspiration that allows them to see further in and make it concrete through their own channel, right? Their own vocation, whatever it is. So we can invest these energies into each other to really get an objective view without letting it like totally have our heads explode, basically. So this is a really good, and this is much later today. So as the day progresses and the moon moves through Virgo, we will get to this point much later in the day where we have this opportunity based on probably a lot of things that are going to start culminating throughout the day. Okay. And the day ends really either late evening, early evening on the West Coast, late when we go across the Atlantic into Africa, into Europe. We do see that we are going to end the day with this opposition to retrograde Neptune. And this is, again, the veil has been pulled away with Neptune retrograde. All of the false illusions that we've been operating under, the water clears up, right? If you have a pool or a hot tub, you know what I'm talking about. Like you have to actually, it gets cloudy, right? It gets foggy in there, and it's not very, especially when shit is stirred up, that it gets cloudy and foggy and it's not very clear. Well, Neptune retrograde is like putting that spa clarifier in your hot tub, and everything clears away and you have to see things for what they are. And we have to really see our limitations and really focalize where our dharma, right? In our immediate reality. And this opposition with the moon is really challenging us to that we shouldn't take it so seriously, but again, the hanged man. And this is like the practical way of engaging the hanged man with where the moon is, which is to be simplistic, right? To be pure and innocent. This is and spontaneous, right? We want to keep this vibrant and pure simplicity at the core of our being as we're meeting all of these tests. And so it can be really disorienting, and it has been, right? It's the illusions are falling away one by one by one after another with Neptune retrograde. This is giving us an opportunity right here in this opposition to keep that simplicity at the core of who we are, so that we don't get lost in the darkness and really just fall apart. Like I said, we don't want our heads to explode, and there's a real potential for that right now. And so this beautiful opposition, it is tense, but we know what to do with oppositions, right? We've talked about this. We know what to do. You find your fulcrum. So you want to be realistic. You want to be able to focalize and centralize your focus on your dharma, right? You want to be real with your limitations and how you've gotten to the place that you are. But you also want to find that midpoint there and bring that pureness to the core of who you are, instead of like really taking it too seriously. And on the other hand, you don't want to get so caught up in like love and light that you are completely bypassing what the reality is. So that's the other way that you can get pulled in that direction too. You definitely need to find the midpoint here. So my friends, I think that we have successfully engage this transmission for today. So if you're interested in a reading or energy work to support your process, you can book through catalystenergies.net. That's in the description box below. You can find Catalyst Energies on Facebook and Telegram, also linked in the description box below. And I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate every single one of you on this journey. We got this, right? We got this. We just have to trust that we have it all within us and continue to cultivate that field within us, right? Tap into the key. We have the keys. We already have them. And things may not be exactly where we want them to be right now. And that's going to become even more frustrating and clear when Chiron stations retrograde tomorrow. But it also is going to give us a really good opportunity to really look at ourselves and what our expectations are, and how power flows where attention goes. And if we keep focusing on what we don't have right now, then that's just going to keep being what we see. So we need to focus on where we're going so we can actually manifest it and hold that and anchor that in for people instead of getting caught up in all of this, like just getting caught up in all of the intentionally confusing language and the hijacking of just about every aspect of our consciousness. It all is within us, and that's something that they can't ever take away as much as they try. They can't ever take that piece of you away, and that is the piece of source that is within all of us. So, all right, guys, I love you. Take care of yourselves today. We'll check in tomorrow. Bye.